Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, August 29th, 2016, in our neck of the woods. And I don't know why it's a neck, but it is. In our neck of the woods, the kids are back in school. So that means fewer and fewer excuses for getting on the air late, I guess. Not necessarily eliminating them all. And, of course, heralds the beginning of that portion of the year during which eventually we will be interrupted in our regular programming by snow emergency. But it's not quite there yet. It's looking to be in the mid-90s for us here. Kids going back to school, trying to decide between the shorts that they need outdoors on their way to school and back home, and the long pants that they need inside where it is, thankfully, air-conditioned, but sometimes a little too cold. So all of the ritual is back in the morning. We just don't know what those rituals are yet. But we managed to get on the air right around 9 o'clock today, escorting the youngest to his first day at the bus stop in middle school. He has formerly walked to school this time. I think this also means, though, technically, that it might mean that during snow emergency delayed openings, they might be able to get themselves out the door and to the bus with just the briefest reminder. It might be that we are past the days where I will have to take 10-15 minutes off the air. Remember those days? If you're an old-timey type listener, you probably do. All right, let's move forward into this new era. I can tell you this, there's nothing much new under the sun in terms of Trump outrages. That is to say, nothing out of the ordinary, which is to say, horrific, disqualifying gaffes and discoveries of ridiculous racism and bigotry in the backgrounds of everybody who's working for Donald Trump, with the possible exception of, what's her name, the pollster, Kellyanne Conway, who has been smart enough not to, so far we haven't turned up anything with her on the record, in the same bigoted way that Bannon, who invests in that kind of bigotry, it's a decision, a positive decision he makes to engage in it. Haven't dug up anything on that. She just plain old has to sit there and look ridiculous, making excuses for the campaign. So let's see. I think short summary of the weekend would be, Steve Bannon turned out to be enormously bigoted against Jews. He's anti-Semitic as well as everything else, which is, I guess, also par for the course in alt-right world. They're very enamored of anti-Semitism and neo-Nazism over there. So no skin off their nose, I guess, very white skin off of their nose in the Trump camp with that one. We'll scare up the story, I suppose, just to fill you in if you happen to have missed it. I think this was divorce number one. It now turns out the name of the first wife, the first now ex-wife, is on the record now, thanks to, I think, the New York Daily News or the Post, one of the tabloids decided to go ahead and just publish it, the Daily News. So yeah, there are two ex-wives, not the Tea Party activist ex-wife who's living in a rented home in Miami, but the California-based, I think, first ex-wife, mother of the twin children, one of whom was spanked famously. I think we mentioned that last week. Anyway, going to school, and I guess some sort of exclusive private school, and they were shocked, well, he was shocked anyway, to find out that Jews went there, and it's terrible. That's basically the story. There are some finer points to it we might comb through. The Archer School for Girls in the L.A. area, I think, if any of you are familiar with that one. By the way, first wife is a woman by the name of Mary Louise Picard, and I guess it should be pointed out these are accusations that surfaced in the pleadings surrounding their divorce. So I guess they're always to be taken with a grain of salt. You very often find things are either exaggerated or at least presented in their worst possible light in divorce proceedings, but, he's one of the worst possible people in the world, so I suppose it might all fit. And I guess he married one of them, too, or at least someone who was a little less awful than he is and realized that she wanted to divorce him. But we'll catch up with all those juicy details later on. There's plenty of other train wrecks going on. Greg knows about them. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, I'm fine. I missed a bit of the intro, so I guess I missed the juicy stuff, huh?
Well, I didn't really go too far into it, but you must have probably seen this in passing. I was just talking about the latest, or one of the latest, the Weekend Bannon story of, oh my gosh, there's Jews in my kid's school. They can't go.
Yes, that's after trying to strangle his wife because she was letting them associate. But as many people pointed out on Twitter, more likely, Jews have just as much distaste for associating with Bannon.
Yes, I might strangle my wife if she
as it goes the other way around.
Yeah.
So I get that. I mean, here it is. You have a guy, Trump, who has his own history of racism, and thanks to the training from his father, not renting properties.
Oh, yes, new developments on that front, too, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then he hires somebody who's an anti-Semite and into domestic violence.
Yes.
And somehow, what really matters is whether or not Clinton gives a press conference.
True. And let's not forget that he has a racist butler.
He has a racist butler, and
a little bit of racist everything's.
When he goes to casinos, he has the people of color employees moved out of the way, so his family doesn't have to run into them. Lots of stuff in terms of stories. But, does it matter to his supporters? Absolutely not. Does it matter to everybody else? Probably.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known it from Sunday. I not only can I not imagine watching the Sunday shows, I can't even watch people watch the Sunday shows anymore. This Sunday, as you mentioned, all about how we'll never know anything about this so-called Hillary Clinton person unless it's revealed in a certain format, the press conference. And I understand people want access to shout questions, although I do remember that they're mostly famous for shouting things like, "What about your gaffes?" or "Will you smoke a Cuban cigar?"
Well, that was the one, that's my favorite because that was the one they wanted to ask but couldn't because that was the press conference that Obama only called on women.
Yeah, well, maybe she
and one of the guys was complaining that I could have asked this really incredibly important question about Cuban cigars, and they wouldn't let me.
Dang.
Yeah. And I heard that, and I said, there might be something to only letting women ask questions at press conferences from now on.
Yeah, well, I guess that would probably be viewed differently, perhaps, if Hillary Clinton did it. But certainly if she did another one later on and called on a bunch of people, then the all.
But wouldn't that be cool?
Pretty good.
I mean, talking about the misogyny in the election, wouldn't it be great if she said from now on, I'm only taking questions from women?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of tough women. They'll ask you, and in fact,
how do you think the press would take to that?
All the questions were good. That's why.
Yeah, they were great questions. What then?
So, I don't know. And I'm not sure what the hell's going on with the press conference thing, except that I'm sure inside they're like, well, the questions just aren't going to be good, and it's going to be garbage.
Well, there's a couple of things about that. I noticed our friend Dana Hool having a back and forth with Alex Burns about it. It is important in a democracy to be able to reach people and ask them. It's not that Clinton hasn't addressed the press. She does many interviews, sometimes one-on-one, one-on-two. Sometimes she calls in to the major stations. They're looking for a more freewheeling, multi-person group on the theory that, in that way you get more questions that perhaps you're not prepared for. Uh-huh. And therefore you get to see how you respond. But the underlying text, which occasionally is voiced, but not necessarily all the time, is that it's really important to the people who are following her day to day, because that's partly how they make their careers. And if you take the press conference away, you lose an opportunity to do something like that.
That's true. I did see Dana mention something like that. It actually reminded me of the dynamic at congressional hearings, where if you watch the whole thing, if you can help it, don't do it in person. But even if you watch the whole thing on C-SPAN, you'll say, how come all of these members of Congress are asking the same questions over and over again? And the answer is they weren't there when anybody else asked them. They show up to be videotaped asking the questions their constituents want to see asked, and knowing that their constituents aren't going to see a videotape of anyone else asking them on the evening news. So it's it's a show platform in some ways.
Right. So, but I think it was Matt Iglesias who published a piece the other day that I keep sending to the journalists who complain about it, and they never respond to it. And it's a article about how the National Press Conference with presidents has really deteriorated over the last 2 decades. And what are you going to do about it? I mean, in other words, it's not just all Clinton-centric. It's not that Clinton won't do them. It's that they haven't gotten very good, or they've gotten worse. And the whole tradition, I guess, goes back to Eisenhower, but not too much before then. So why is it a tradition, and why do you have to keep doing it, especially if they haven't gotten any good? If it's a lousy show, why can't you cancel it?
Well, that's a legitimate question. I mean, obviously, they do shake up the cast from time to time. That's true. But
they do that in Saturday Night Live too.
Right.
And sometimes the seasons really stink.
That's true. That does happen, and you still, I guess, you can still pull out all the bad examples of things, either the cigar questions or I should have a press conference. So that you could put what's that guy's name? The Gannon character, the fake reporter from Talon News. Way back when.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
I mean, why not have a press conference so that you can't tell who the hell is out there asking questions and why, as opposed to, I know a couple of really skilled, highly respected reporters. Let's sit down one at a time with them and do retail work. That sounds good to me. Most people like that, I think. But okay. Because if you don't want to know what kind of tree she wants to be, then I guess it sucks.
Right. So I'm going to just send this over to you for links. So when the show summary gets put together later on Daily Kos, Scott Anderson does that. Thank you so much. At least you'll have the piece I'm referencing, Hillary Clinton's press conferences problem explained. A lot of it, I think, has to do with her incredible distrust of the press. Yeah. That goes back to Watergate and the idea that you can have a press conference with 20 different people asking how come nobody likes you, perhaps is not particularly desirable to her.
Yeah, that's. I can't imagine looking forward to it. Although
instead of the same person asking, you have all these different people asking.
One at a time, please.
One at a time.
Yeah.
Well, never mind that. Why don't I like you?
I don't know why
why don't you tell me why I don't like you? Enough about me.
Your turn.
It's your turn.
I don't know why. I guess at some point then it becomes, now if I do it now, then it looks like I've been forced to do it. But
yeah. So with the 70 some odd days left in the campaign, I don't think it's going to happen. But I think that she'll continue to make herself available. Meanwhile, this is an interesting piece from the Huffington Post, which is Donald Trump is down in the polls, but not out of the race yet.
Oh, okay. This is starting to sound weird. Okay, down in the polls, but not out of the race.
Been down so long, looks like up to me.
Yeah, The Hill is saying, he cut her lead in half this week.
Well,
like that.
Yes, that's because the Morning Consult poll went from 6 to 3. And that means everything, right? I mean, there's a bunch of that's a decent poll. There's a bunch of junk polls out there. It probably is true that things are tightening. That the problem is that you get different polls. And when you get different polls and start comparing them, you get all sorts of crazy results. Look, she was just up 10 in this poll, and now this other completely different poll, she's only up by 4. Does that mean that it's tightening? No, it does not. It means it's a different poll.
Yeah, well, that should be obvious, but I guess it isn't.
It isn't. So what do we have right now? Well, the Huffington Post average still has Clinton up by 7, but there are some new Emerson polls out today. And the Emerson polls suggest that some of the states are tightening. Emerson is a little bit Republican-leaning, and they do tend to use part of their screen to figure out how you voted in 2012. Whenever somebody screens a poll by sorting you into categories based on who you said you voted for, it's almost always wrong because people generally misrepresent and misremember how they voted. So that's part of the reason with the USC Dorn's Life daily tracker is wrong. And that one, fluctuates between a 1-point Trump lead and a 2-point Clinton lead, and it bounces around, and it's not all that helpful. But the who's going to win part of that poll is always like 55% think Clinton will. So anyway, Emerson comes out with some swing polls this morning, tied in Ohio, up by 5 in Michigan, and up by 3 in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania's been running a lot more than that, and so this will push all of the who's going to win guesstimates of odds to the Trump side, because these are state polls that are relatively favorable to him. Remember, a relatively favorable Trump poll means he's not losing by as much. Kind of an important point, because he's never winning in these polls.
Yeah.
And that really is the meta message. But, what we don't know is what the margin's going to be, so this helps. And looking at that helps you to predict a little bit about what's going to wind up happening down ballot, which we all care about. So in any case, if you go, for example, to, New York Times, for example, they have a very consistent 5-point lead for Trump in the polls. They count them differently. All of the different trackers, we've talked about this on the show the other day, count them differently. But if you look at who will win, then we have New York Times saying 89% chance for Clinton, was as high as 90 yesterday. And if you look at the other guesstimates, 538 says 81, Daily Kos says 82. The markets still are 79. They predict-wise is between 79 and 80 pretty consistently. And Sam Wang's Princeton Election Consortium has 95.
114. But he wouldn't make
that's the Trump unskewers.
Right.
So everybody, Cook, Rothenberg, and Sabato all have either leaning Dem or, as in Sabato's case, likely Dem. And, of course, when you look at the Electoral College numbers, everybody has her pretty much over 270 already. The funny thing is, of all the different places that didn't have her already over 270 was the Associated Press.
Huh.
The Associated Press over the weekend, on top of the mismangling the Clinton Foundation story, and I got a piece for you on that one.
Okay.
And not only did they misstate the Dwayne Wade controversy. Heard about that one?
I don't think I have.
Oh, well, take a look at, for example, the Pundit Roundup for today.
All right.
And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see what happened is that the Associated Press took the story. This, unfortunately, Dwayne Wade's cousin was shot.
Oh, yes. Okay, I heard about that.
That's a very tragic thing. And Trump himself tweets out Dwayne, spelling his name wrong.
Yes.
Dwayne Wade's cousin was just shot and killed walking her baby in Chicago. Just what I've been saying, African Americans will vote Trump. And obnoxious, similar to the Orlando Pulse tweet. You see, I told you this was coming, vote for me. Right? So it's all about the narcissist. No compassion whatsoever.
Yeah.
And people, comment on it. John Ziegler, for any other POTUS campaign, this is a game-ending act of classlessness. With Trump, it's simply Saturday morning. Ryan Lizard, this is not how a normal human being reacts to news of a murder. So he gets criticism, and what does he do? He re-releases the same exact tweet, only this time he spells Dwayne Wade's name right.
That was the classless act. I knew it. Oh,
right?
Yeah, all right. All publicity is good publicity. Just make sure you spell the. Oh, damn, that's what I did wrong.
Right.
Oh.
So he does that, and then a little bit later, because it's coming from an iPad and not from the Android, Kellyanne Conway wrote this. She wrote, sorry to hear about this, compassion, yada, yada, yada. And so how does the AP handle this controversy? Because he's getting, ripped apart on Twitter for these obnoxious, self-centered tweets about Dwayne Wade's cousin.
Yeah.
So let me read the Associated Press tweet for you, because it's a classic.
Okay.
Dwayne Wade and Donald Trump speak out on Twitter in wake of the NBA star's cousin's fatal shooting.
That's it?
That's it.
Speak out.
They speak out.
So
Dwayne Wade made a statement, and then Donald Trump made a statement, and this is how they handle it.
Two statements.
Right? Brendan Nyhan, political scientist, says this tweet reads like a parody of both sides journalism.
Yeah.
And Y.F. Ruthven tweets, this is better than the original headline, which was Clinton silent as former donor attacks NBA All-Star.
Although that would have worked.
Right? And Time has a nice piece in terms of covering what actually happened in terms of the back and forth. So, AP screwing up that as well, on top of screwing up the the Clinton Foundation story. And then, getting back to why I brought them up, so they tweeted a story about their latest electoral vote map.
Oh?
And in the story, they have Clinton leading. Although for them, it's only 269 because they can't get themselves to say that New Hampshire leans Democrat. That's fine. But in the tweet, they tweeted out a map that had Clinton 233 and Trump 233.
233?
Each.
Oh.
Right?
All right,
so it's like, even their,
it's like
their
those
map
Fox News
tweets
maps that
have this false sense of objectivity, both sides, where everybody has to be equal no matter what the reality. And the fact that this is an asymmetric campaign, they can't even handle on their maps.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it was just a capsule of what's going on at AP and why they're wrong. Of course, they were on the Sunday shows, the aforementioned Sunday shows that you don't watch, trying to defend what they do. It was awful. There really is no defense. They refused to correct the tweets that they had about the Clinton Foundation. And they, refuse to address the actual issues of what's going on, which is to say, this is a great piece from a tweet from Heather Herbert, who is a national security expert. All of this stuff's on the Pundit Roundup today. Clinton Foundation allegations make more sense if you know little to nothing about how U.S. foreign policy works.
I know little to nothing about it.
Right. And so in that regard, what is really going on with the Clinton Foundation? There's actually a pretty decent piece here by Ryan Grimm and Daniel Marantz on the Huffington Post about this, entitled, "Here's How the AP Should Have Written Its Hillary Clinton Article."
All right.
And it's actually a fair criticism of the Clinton Foundation, unlike what the AP did. And what they did is they took the AP story, put it in bold, and then added the stuff that would actually make it make sense.
Oh.
And you don't need to fisk every line, and you don't need to go over the whole thing. But here's the gist of it. The reality is that the overlap of donors and access is a function. I added donors and access. The overlap is a function of a worldwide capitalistic system in which oligarchs, corporate CEOs, and celebrity heads of state mingle to form a global elite that dictates global agenda. This can sometimes take the form of quid pro quos, which, I will add, by the way, was absent here, but is more often a subtle form of exchange in which exclusion from or inclusion within the elite club depends as much upon who you know as the size of the check you can write. The Clintons did not create this system. Very important point here. But they've become central players. It's a cozy world inhabited by a select coterie of political, business, and media elites where tomorrow's news is often the product of a not-so-serendipitous conversation between a TV pundit and a corporate CEO who are introduced by a foreign minister they both know. In addition to the talking shop, exchanging the tips of their respective trades, they speak about solutions to social ills they rarely encounter directly, typically entertaining ideas within a narrow spectrum of proposals that do not threaten their worldview. So many such encounters occur at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, more commonly known as Davos, that the gathering has become a descriptor for a certain breed of cosmopolitan international elite, the Davos set. And Hillary and Bill are stars of the Davos set.
Yes.
So, to be fair, I mean, that's not an unreasonable way of looking at how those two happen to operate. They've been around a long time. They know a lot of people. They can leverage that to get donations. They have access to people. Now, if your opinion is all of that is wrong, okay, that's not an illegitimate way to look at the world. But you also, if you're going to be a purist about it, may have trouble finding anybody to run for something like president who has none of those features. Yes. And if you do find somebody, they may not win because they may have other things going on along with this one good feature that you find out about them, because people are complicated and they're usually not perfect.
Yeah. Although sometimes that works just fine, like with the profiles of Trump loyalists who just say, well, he just talks like a tough guy, so I don't care what the policy is, I'm in. So I guess if you're not nuanced, then nuance won't matter to you.
Right. Anyway, so this Huffington Post piece, I think, is a reasonable criticism. I think it's a reasonable approach to trying to see what's going on here. But at the same time, it avoids some of the innuendo about why this might be difficult by simply laying it out there. Here is your choice. If you want somebody with experience, you're also going to get somebody who's going to be in the Davos set.
Yes, that's
they go
where
together
things
because
are
they're part and parcel of the same thing. The two sides of the coin.
Even bad things. Yes.
So you can't separate them. So, you have to decide whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. And if you do decide it's a good thing or a bad thing, you also have to weigh that against the person she's running against.
This is hard.
Not for me.
Well, I mean, I've already decided. I can see where a person would say, and it certainly will be difficult for people who are Hillary Clinton holdouts and who may still be, say, well, that's just the problem. Because they're part of the Davos set, I know what they do and what they do there. But on the other hand, I mean, can you imagine? The Davos set is going to stay, and they're going to continue to have a very large role in.
Right, and that's why I think it's a very legitimate criticism.
Yeah,
much better than the innuendo that somehow or other the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who they would already normally see because Secretary of States do those things. And by the way, Matt Iglesias listed every single other Secretary of State in the Bush administration and beyond who also met with the Crown Prince of Bahrain as Secretary of State, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
This criticism, I think, is more meaningful, tangible, and complicated, because everything is complicated. So nobody should get the idea that if you're a Clinton supporter, the world is pure if you vote for her. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. In fact, you're more likely to vote for her because you think the world never is.
Well, there's certainly been a lot left out of the story of these. The
nothing happened
APs did
that
poorly.
they had the innuendo to suggest happened. However, other things are true too.
Yes, they do. Things do happen. It's certainly true. All right, but yet no one will tire of this. And I guess if they do, then they'll just say, "Well, she's also deathly ill."
On top of everything else. Yes. So, in the meantime, David Duke is still supporting very, very supportive things about Donald Trump. There was this really interesting series of tweets that I paired together on the Pundit Roundup. Something of a visual, but I'll describe it for you on the air. To me, kind of summarize the whole situation where we're at. So, this was tweeted by Military HD. And it's a 90-year-old standing up from a wheelchair
I see it.
to shake Obama's hand. And the 90-year-old stood up, says the tweet. Obama told him he didn't have to stand. He said, "No, sir, you're the president." That's one America. And the other America is David Duke tweeting, "You anti-whites, leftists, and cucks have once again proved your time is coming, win or lose, train's not stopping." And then has the classic train running with Pepe the Frog as the engineer. With "there are no brakes on this train," which is a favorite alt-right, that is to say white supremacist meme that is often tweeted out or included in stories. And so, which America do you want? Do you want the one where the 90-year-old feels like he has to stand up because that's how you respect the president? Or do you want Dr. David Duke? Why is he a doctor, you might ask? Because he got his doctorate in history at one of these diploma mill universities in the Ukraine.
In Ukraine?
Ukraine, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Okay. He speaks Ukrainian?
So now he starts calling himself Dr.
Sure,
David.
why not? Well, doctor, I just blew up the tracks for your train.
Right,
Now
anyway, so if you look at his tweet and you see Dr. David Duke, that's what that's all about, just so you know.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Duke. There's also Trump's doctor was back in the news this weekend, somehow.
There was a lot of stories about him saying a lot of stupid things. I'm not sure what else. I know he only looked at Trump for 5 minutes and then wrote the he's in great shape letter while Trump waited outside in the limo.
That's really odd. I mean, you don't have to be on hand to write the letter, but usually there's an examination that perfunctorily goes along with it. If I'm going to write this, put it on the record, let me at least do an exam. But I guess this guy was just really sure he was in the most excellent health, etc., and was going to be. I thought his interesting. I guess they followed up finally and said, "How do you come to the conclusion that he's the healthiest person who would ever have been elected president?" And he said, "Well, all the rest of them who were elected president are sick or dead."
Right.
which I thought was, okay, that's interesting. Of course, minus Barack Obama, who's alive and was elected president, and I guess it could be their theory that he's sick. If Hillary Clinton is deathly ill, then so is he.
Right. Not that people need it, but let's read a little bit from the Southern Poverty Law Center
Yes.
David Duke piece, just so people are a little bit more familiar. Former Klansman David Duke has made much of his academic credentials of late. On his website, he repeatedly refers to himself as Dr. David Duke, a reference to the supposed Ph.D. he earned. That's air quotes. Remember, everything about David Duke has to be in air quotes. Every other word. In 2005, at an anti-Semitic Ukrainian institution described as a diploma mill by the State Department.
I mean,
Around the white supremacist
Ukrainian,
world,
that
excited
seems
accolades to Duke's scholarship abound. As the closest thing the radical right has to an intellectual today, Duke claims to uphold the high standards of academia. His website brims with criticisms of plagiarism, although they come naturally in the form of repeated attacks on civil rights leader Martin Luther King, who is characterized as a world-class plagiarist. Plagiarism, Duke's site adds piously, is theft, a ripoff that the site suggests amounts to a serious felony. I guess he's referring to Melania Trump, right? I guess
yeah.
not. I don't know.
Almost certainly.
Which brings us to Duke's last book. When Duke published his self-proclaimed worldwide bestseller, Jewish Supremacism, My Awakening to the Jewish Question in 2002, he promised that the book's amazing documentary evidence would challenge your most cherished beliefs about who is threatening the existence of European Americans. Duke's thesis was simple. Jews oppose all ethnic solidarity other than their own, and they consistently oppose all organizations seeking to preserve the interests and heritage of Europeans. In a nutshell, Jews undermine the white race.
Aha.
In an attempt to present the book as the product of sober academic research instead of rank anti-Semitism, Duke tells readers on the book's promotional webpage that the tome derives its real power from referencing major sources, all of that in air quotes. Duke encourages his readers to go to the materials he cites and check them out for yourself. Good advice, but a careful consideration of his sources. Find something interesting. It turns out many of Duke's citations of academic works are exactly the same, down to the placement of brackets, dates, and periods, as those that appear in the works of Kevin McDonald, an anti-Semitic professor of psychology at California State University, Long Beach, who has long written dire tomes about how Jews threaten Western civilization, and goes on and talks about, his so-called academic work. But, it's important to remember who this guy is, and that he is tweeting out the train won't be stopping and all that sort of stuff. Support Donald Trump. And does Trump get to be tarred with this? Well, according to George Will, not really, because there are leftists who say nasty things.
Oh, yeah, right. Sure.
So it's all the same. Folks, it isn't all the same, and people have to keep in mind exactly what folks like David Duke are and what the alt-right white supremacist group really is, why it mattered that Hillary Clinton gave that speech on Thursday, remembering that Trump's immigration speech he claims to be ready to give this coming Wednesday, and the speech that Hillary Clinton gave last Thursday are all aimed at the same group of people, basically white Republican women.
Oh. Well, I guess then it is up.
But if that's the playing field, he's already lost.
Well, if they're both targeting the same demographic, then both sides.
Yeah.
So they were right all Sunday.
Right. Trump is trying to convince Republicans to vote for him, and Hillary's trying to convince Republicans to vote for her.
Yeah. Same. That I thought was the Sunday take on her speech. It was essentially by telling people about the alt-right and providing documentary evidence of Trump's link with it, you're the real racist. And all of this mudslinging, it's a race to the bottom, and everybody's engaging in exactly the same kind of behavior.
Right. That race to the bottom was driving me nuts. What happened is that Chuck Todd had a Meet the Press that was supposedly designed all around that. A pretty decent show for most of it. But then he had to have his editorial commentary about, Susan Collins style, how troubled he is, that everything is a race to the bottom. And what does he do? He lists all the insults that Trump has made, includes Paula Page's stuff that you talked about the other day on the show last week, about, vulgar voicemails left to people who oppose him, and by the way, also saying that the people of color are the real enemy.
Yes.
And then throwing in Clinton's alt-right speech and saying, see, it's all the same, both sides, race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And how in the world anybody with half a brain, let alone a full brain, can consider Clinton's alt-right speech in the same category as those other vile things to say? You really have to stretch in order to do that, but they stretched.
I don't know. I mean, the only explanation I can come up with
How is calling you out on this stuff a race to the bottom?
Well,
that's the
I'm
whole thing.
uncomfortable with
You know,
both of those
you have all these people saying vile stuff. You have David Duke being who he is, supporting Donald Trump, and then you have somebody on the other side say, "Hey, did you know that David Duke is supporting Donald Trump?" Both sides, look at you. You brought the whole thing down to the gutter.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's only a matter of the only thing I can think of, which is wrong, but it's the only thing I can think of is, well, it makes me uncomfortable when people do engage in this kind of rhetoric, and it makes me
even more uncomfortable when people point it out.
Yeah, well, it makes me uncomfortable when people, say what the rhetoric was. And what's interesting, though, is, of course, if Hillary Clinton's speech had instead been presented as, I don't know, a 60 Minutes piece by one of their journalists, that would have been fantastic. That's journalism. That's presenting what's out there and laying the facts out. But when a candidate
nobody
says
is disputing the documentation that Clinton brought to that speech on Thursday.
Yeah. Well,
nobody's saying it isn't true.
They just don't like the way...
They just don't like it being said out loud.
I guess so. And
you're supposed to whisper these things. The way it's properly done is that, when George W. Bush wanted to win South Carolina, he whispered rumors about John McCain to reporters. That's how it's done.
Yeah, you don't say it out loud.
You don't say it out loud. These guys are not playing by the rules that we decided are the rules.
It reminds me a little bit. I mean, I guess it's the same play as the ABC anchor who interviewed. Why am I blanking? Elizabeth Warren at the Democratic convention, or maybe at the Republican convention, and asked, when Donald Trump calls you Pocahontas, is that racist? Yes, it's racist. Well, then aren't you racist because you just called him a name? They sort of think that name calling is the same thing as outright racism. That name calling is bad. I remember that.
Labeling somebody is not the same thing as earning the title.
Yeah. Well, there is that, right? Okay, sure, he's a convict, but you're calling him a convict. That's terrible.
Aren't you the real convict?
Yeah, that would not work, right?
No, it wouldn't work. Why should this work?
Aren't you the real racist? Aren't you the real? That would be a great confrontation. Yeah, I heard you just reported that someone was convicted to prison. Aren't you? Doesn't that make you the real convict?
Yeah, for bringing it up.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's right. You don't know what, and you don't know what you're talking about either. So, same.
I don't know what you're talking about. Elizabeth Warren completely defensive about her convict comment.
Yeah.
That's what they write. She's on the defensive because she denied saying something she didn't say.
Yeah. That was rather disturbing, of course, to see that. And I don't know how you tell people what's happening in a campaign. I mean,
you have to be if you have an asymmetric campaign, it's really simple. You have to be asymmetric in your reporting. And if you don't like that, get out of the business. You're not doing the right job. You're not informing your readers.
They want to report symmetrically because that's the way it's always been done, but this isn't the way it's being conducted this year. So, an accurate portrayal of an asymmetrical campaign would show asymmetry, I suppose, and they're just not built for that.
Something about the reality having a liberal bias. Well, tough. If you're reporting on reality, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know? And if it winds up favoring Clinton and disfavors Trump, so be it. He brought it on himself. Two last pieces before I scoot out. This one's from the New York Times. It's just kind of interesting. At least 110 Republican leaders won't vote for Donald Trump. Here's when they reach their breaking point. And what it is on the left side of the page, you have specific things that Trump said in a timeline, reading downward. Mr. Trump announces candidacy. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crimes. They're rapists, referring to Mexico. He's not a war hero, referring to McCain. And then after each one of these statements, on the right side, you have who of the Republican Party said, that's it, I can't vote for this guy.
Okay. Well,
Which statement really made you come to that conclusion? Interestingly, so the McCain piece He's not a war hero. Not directly after that, but somewhat after that. Club for Growth announces an ad campaign to discredit Mr. Trump. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then
it's not the same thing.
The statements themselves are interesting. I know more about ISIS than the generals do. Believe me, that was in a Clinton ad. Now this poor guy, you ought to see this guy jerking his arms around, referring in a mocking tone to imitate a disabled New York Times reporter. And then the San Bernardino attack, then Donald Trump calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Following that, Representative Reed Ribble of Wisconsin says he will not support Trump if he's the Republican nominee. Christine Todd Whitman says Trump is employing the kind of hateful rhetoric and exploiting the insecurities of this nation in the way that allowed Hitler and Mussolini to rise to power in the lead up to World War II. Christine Todd Whitman, aren't you the real fascist then?
Yes, that's true.
Got to remember that when people say stuff like this. Then when people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia. That lost them Peter Wehner, former official in the Reagan and Bush administrations, and
you mean
National
Putin?
Review.
Isn't he the real Putin?
Yeah, exactly. So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of him, would you? I would bring back waterboarding, and I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding. That lost Carlos Corbello, representative of Florida. I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're talking about with white supremacy, white supremacists. That lost Ben Sass. That lost Paul Wolfowitz, Ken Melman, Mel Martinez, Scott Rigel, Charlie Barker, Robert Blackwell, Elliot Cohn, Michael Chertoff, Patrick Cronin. There's a long list here. It goes on and on and on and on, and that was after the David Duke thing. So that was a big deal. That lost a tremendous number of Republicans, maybe looks like about 35 or 40 of them, just from that one statement, bringing us back to the speech that Clinton did on Thursday and why she gave it.
Well, isn't she really David Duke?
Yeah, the real David Duke.
Right, the non-doctor.
Right. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee. That actually lost a number of Republicans.
Really? That's funny. I thought they were
Anna, Mickey Edwards, and Rudy Fernandez, former special assistant to President George W. Bush.
That's because they believed the thing about the hands.
Right. The images are worth 1,000 words. Well, they found it vulgar. Doesn't that make you the real vulgarian? The images are worth 1,000 words. A Twitter post with an unflattering image of Senator Cruz's wife, Heidi, next to a glamour shot of Mr. Trump's wife, Melania. That lost him Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland. Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, representative of Florida, into my usual name mangling here. Sorry, folks.
Right.
Jeb Bush, Robert Dole, Lindsey Graham, Bob Inglis, and Rosario Marin, U.S. Treasurer under George W. Bush.
Presumably Ted Cruz as well.
I've been treated very unfairly by this judge. Now the judge is of Mexican heritage. I'm building a wall. Okay, I'm building a wall. That lost him Mark Kirk, Senator of Illinois, and Chris Shays, former representative of Connecticut. Then he said, President Obama. It's fascinating with what does it take to get you off the Trump train?
Right.
Remember, the train has no brakes. President Obama claims to know our enemy, and yet he continues to prioritize our enemy over our allies, and for that matter, the American people. When I am president, it'll always be America first. That lost him Arnie Carlson, former governor of Minnesota, Richard Armitage, Brent Scowcroft, Henry Paulson, and Mark Racicot, former governor of Montana and RNC chairman.
Yes.
And on and on and on. It's just another one that lost him a huge number of Republicans. If you look at his wife, she was standing there. She had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say. You tell me. On the parents of a Muslim soldier killed in Iraq after they denounced Mr. Trump at the Democratic National Convention. Those are the cons. And, of course, that was an important one. There we have Charlie Dent, Adam Kissinger, Vin Weber, Gordon Humphrey, former senator of New Hampshire, Susan Collins, Leslie Westine, William Milliken, Tom Ridge, John Negroponte. Just picking out names. There's a long, long list for that one. Mike Hayden. Who else we got? James Jeffrey, National Security Advisor. A lot of these are security people. Who else we got here? Maybe there's about 35, 40 names there.
Okay.
And there isn't any. There's a couple more, 3 or 4 more, but none of them are as long a list.
What's the last
2
one
things that he said most about David Duke. That was a game breaker for a huge number of people, and the Khan Gold Star mom stuff also a huge list. The last one that he said, he's the founder of ISIS. He's the founder. He founded ISIS. I would say the co-founder would be crooked Hillary Clinton, Connie Morella, Fred Goldberg, David Durenberger, Tom Campbell, Carlos Gutierrez, former George W. Bush's Commerce Secretary. They highlight those who actually had Republican administration appointments. Yeah. So they put those in blue. So the ISIS comment and founding ISIS lost him another 7 or 8. But, he already had lost a huge number of this 110 list prior to that.
Right.
So in order,
Connie Morella. Boy.
The David Duke stuff, the Gold Star family stuff, and the founder of ISIS are the 3 statements that lost the most Republicans.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those feel like the major turning points, if they can be called that.
Mm-hmm. Finally, this is a piece from Politico this morning. Trump might already be out of time. With negative perceptions hardened, his late adjustments on policy and rhetoric could sway too few people to matter. Kind of an interesting read. But according to a national survey released by Quinnipiac, that was the one where Clinton was up 10, 90% of likely voters have already made up their mind about the presidential race and are unlikely to change. So whenever you hear a pundit or a reporter talk about a Trump pivot, as in the immigration speech he is to give on Wednesday, assuming he doesn't cancel, it's dumb. All right? So then you can say to the reporter, aren't you the real pivoter?
Yeah, that's right. Didn't you just pivot, really? When you think about it, why aren't you consistent? Why the flip-flop?
Trump has no immigration policy. He's never had an immigration policy. He doesn't care about immigration. That itself is going to lose him a handful of people. But it's not going to make any new converts, which is the important part. So even though he may lose very few people over his nonsense about immigration, in other words, his voters really don't care what he says. Just even losing a few when you're not gaining any and you're behind is a disaster. So we'll see what he has to say on Wednesday. If Kellyanne Conway writes the speech for him, it'll probably be, interesting, and if he reads from a teleprompter, it might even be coherent. It doesn't matter. The very next day, he'll go out and do something stupid again, and then Steve Bannon will wind up talking to the group of people who really don't listen to Kellyanne Conway, and we'll see where that goes. It will be interesting to see if Steve Bannon lasts on the campaign. There's just so many revelations about him as we started the show talking about, but that's an unknown at this point. It's a known unknown.
Right. Well, we do know that we don't know it. We
do know that there's plenty of stuff, and we don't know what difference it makes.
Yes. No one knows.
Because if you bring it up, then aren't you really the domestic violence person?
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, if you bring up his anti-Semitic stuff, doesn't that make you the real anti-Semite?
Yes, probably true. But that we knew was the case anyway. I look at what I do to myself, for God's sake.
Dr. David Duke's right about one thing.
Yes.
The Trump train has no brakes.
That's true. It might not even really be a train, but...
That's true. It might not even have a conductor.
That's true also. I mean, it's one of those hand carts, like from the cartoons, and it's just... It may just be Dr. Duke doing that one side of the pump there, and Donald Trump probably sitting in one of those golden chairs saying, faster, faster.
Right, exactly. So. Anyway, with that, that's the Monday morning summary. We'll see what happens this week. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. For a programming note, I will not be here on Wednesday. And I probably won't be here on Thursday either, although still trying to work that out. But thanks so much for listening, folks. If you listen by download, podcast, or wherever you do it, we'll be happy to see you back. And if you're listening to us later and not live, that is very cool, too. Thanks so much for the Netroots Radio folks for making it happen. And if we're still on in the We Act Radio catchment area, if they haven't canceled us, thanks so much.
How would we know?
We never know. But, keep listening, because David's got an hour and 10 minutes left of I have no idea what he's going to say.
Right. And I can tell you where I'll look. That's about it. That's the best I can do.
Very good. All right, take care.
Greg.
Take a look at the Pundit Roundup today. I'm subbing for Tim Lang, Meteor Blades, who's on vacation.
Okay.
And we got some interesting stuff there, some interesting visuals. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. All right, take care, Greg. Yeah, let's see. Where can we go? First of all, I guess we might as well fill in the blanks about the story about Steve Bannon that I led off with. Anti-Semitic Trump campaign CEO Stephen Bannon, not a big fan, I'm reading you the headline, not a big fan of, quote, whiny brat, unquote, Jews, ex-wife says. I'm not, okay. All right, there's a video, but I don't know if it's necessary to play. I also don't know how long it goes for. Oh, but look at that. Autoplay was on, but good, it didn't play. Although, look at this, I can't switch it off either. Which reminds me of another story I forgot to mention that's waiting in the wings. Okay. Donald Trump's campaign CEO, Stephen Bannon, was branded an anti-Semite by the same ex-wife who claimed he choked her. And let's see. I was interrupted for a good reason by note from Greg. I think we did get to the thing on Friday, right? The Vagenda of Manicide piece. That was, but it's a new one. Okay, this one was the one we read over at Daily Kos when they found the sign. So there's a new piece, and I guess I should mention that. By the way, now that they've bought the vagendaofmanicide.com, it is now a Hillary fundraising site. So if you feel like donating money and you want to have some additional fun and I guess perpetuate the use of the phrase, and that's always a good thing, why not go over there and donate that way? I have there's a million directions I could go in. And Gideon, you have a question about Trump. Why don't you go ahead and prepare that one? Submit it in writing, please, and we'll see if we can't fit it into our queue. Let's see. If the question is Stephen Bannon, CEO of the campaign, an anti-Semite? The answer appears to be yes. Mary Louise Picard said in 2007, that's the name of the first wife, which was redacted in the first story we read about something the other day. His domestic abuse. This was in 2007 court declaration. Bannon didn't want their twin daughters attending the Archer School for Girls in Los Angeles because many Jewish students were enrolled at the elite institution. The biggest problem he had with Archer is the number of Jews that attended, Picard said in her statement signed on June 27, 2007. It's not like it's ancient history. He said that he doesn't like the way they raised their kids to be whiny brats, and that he didn't want the girls going to school with Jews, Picard wrote. That doesn't sound good. I told him that there are children who are Jewish at a competing school, I guess one other one they were thinking of, and he asked me what the percentage was. I told him I didn't know because it wasn't an issue for me, and I'm not raising the girls to be either anti-Semitic or prejudiced against anyone, she wrote. Bannon asked his ex-wife if it bothered her that a second school, the Willows Community School, I know these two schools are not happy about this attention, used to be a temple. What a weird objection, unless I guess is the idea that, well, it used to be a temple and so it's Jewish affiliated still, or is he like the building was contaminated by Jews? I don't know how serious an anti-Semite this drunkardly looking train wreck is. Oh, sorry, did I comment on his appearance? And while checking out yet another school, Bannon asked the director during a sit-down why there were, quote, so many Hanukkah books in the library, unquote. This is just, I don't know what to make of this. This is just another one of those guys reveling in the obvious impropriety of anti-Semitism. Is it because he's anti-Semitic? Yeah, I would guess at the bottom of it all, yes. There's no payoff for doing this in a private meeting with school administrators, unless, I guess, you're trying to spike admission for your girls at that school. And that could be anything. I guess in a divorce proceeding, it could be just a matter of, maybe he's setting up to fight for custody of the children. My ex-wife can't educate them properly. I want them to go to an elite public school, or private school rather, and she's been unable to make that happen. Well, it's because you keep going to the admissions directors and asking about Jews. Oh, is that it? I don't know. Anyway, at the time, Mr. Bannon never said anything like that, and proudly sent the girls to Archer for their middle school and high school education, a spokeswoman for Bannon told the Daily News. Picard and Bannon were locked in a contentious child custody war, when she accused him of the bigoted behavior a decade after first filing for divorce. She also claimed Bannon physically attacked her inside their Santa Monica, California residence in 1996 and later ran her out of town to get out of his criminal trial. So that she wouldn't show up as the key witness against him for it, I guess. She said Bannon blew up at her on January 1st, 1996 in an argument over her plan to take a credit card to the store. Bannon became physical with me and grabbed me by the throat and arm, she said in her sworn statement. She didn't use the name Bannon. That was inserted parenthetically. She said Bannon chased her into their house, threatening to kidnap the girls. She said, I took the phone to call the police, and he grabbed the phone away, throwing it across the room and breaking it as he screamed that I was a, quote, crazy effing C-word. Then he left. Cops responded to the fight and found red marks on her left wrist and the right side of her neck, according to a police report released by Santa Monica's officials Friday. Bannon faced misdemeanor domestic violence, battery, and dissuading a witness charges and hired a criminal lawyer, court records show. The criminal attorney threatened me, I guess Picard, indicating that if respondent, that would be Bannon, went to jail, I would have no money and no way to support the children, Picard wrote. She said Bannon told her to leave town so she couldn't be served in the case or testify against him. I was told that I could go anywhere in the world. His attorney, along with respondent, arranged for me to leave town until the trial was over, and it was okay for me to return home. That's not good for the attorney, if it's true. I left town for 2 weeks with the children and was an hour and a half away by car until the attorney phoned me and told me I could come back, she wrote. The bottom line is he had a great relationship with the twins. He has a great relationship with the ex-wife. He still supports them. That's what Priate, I guess did they identify him and I missed it? I guess that's the attorney. So the attorney says, oh yeah, he's got a great relationship with all of them. To Politico, in response to the domestic violence allegations first reported by the Political News website late Thursday. Okay, Daily News filling us in on what Politico is. Thank you very much for doing that. All right, let's see. Just a quick aside here. Let me look at Gideon's question. Is it fair to blame McConnell and company for the rise of Trump? McConnell? Well, it's fair to blame McConnell for almost anything at this point. I wouldn't trace it to McConnell. You could certainly go further back than him, but I assume, well, let's see, is the question, does he have some share of the blame for not speaking out more forcefully against him? It seems clear that I would guess that McConnell, as Senate Majority Leader, has had a very great interest in minimizing the damage that Trump can do to his Senate candidates. And so you would think that he would be doing, or perhaps you could guess that he could be doing more to minimize that damage by either somehow trying to stop the Trump nomination or pulling the rug out from under him. Now, I suppose there are probably Trump supporters who would join you in blaming McConnell in an odd way, in saying the more people like McConnell oppose Trump's rise, the more certain I am that it's the right thing to do because I'm anti-establishment and McConnell is establishment. So there's some of that going on among Trump supporters as well. Nothing I can see stylistically that in the way of similarities between the way McConnell works and Trump works, except insofar as others before McConnell and before Trump have made it more acceptable to simply blatantly lie about what's going on or why certain bills are or aren't under consideration or will or won't be filibustered. But that wasn't an invention of Trump's or anything like that. I don't know. I don't know where I wouldn't have included probably McConnell in the pantheon of people who led most directly to the Trump phenomenon. I think most people, it's certainly much more fashionable to point towards Newt Gingrich as a starting point, but I don't know. I think everybody, there's a lot of sources for all this. I mean, although Mitt Romney eventually released some tax information, I think Romney did a lot in terms of making it possible to even survive as a candidate without having released your taxes for however long you want to do it. So there was a lot. I think there's a lot of Romney in there. There's some. You kind of have to stretch, I think, to make the connection to McConnell. Although there's, I'm sure, a lot of orchestration that goes on behind the scenes as majority leader. He could. I suppose there's much more he could have been doing to prevent the rise of Trump if he were interested in doing it, and he really should have been more interested in preventing it. I just don't know whether it was something he thought he could do. I guess he had his own problems on his hands and wanted to stay as far away from the Trump issue as possible. I don't know. I wouldn't have put him there. If there's something in particular that you think connects the two, I'd be interested in seeing it. Let's take a look at some of the other fun stories circulating. Some Trump related, some not. What was it that we were reading that I was reminded of? We were reading the stories, the Bannon story, the ex-wife. Let's see. There was something. Dang, now I can't even remember what it was. I should have made a note to myself about what I was reminded of. But there's many things that I have to catch up on. Last week I know that I hinted at but didn't get around to mentioning the very ridiculous statements made by Katrina Pearson during the last week, I guess on the immigration issue, where you all would have seen it by now, but I just wanted to note for the record, for my own satisfaction, that we've said it on the record, that Katrina Pearson, I guess, was asked about his latest, I don't know what you would call it, flip-flop, I guess, on immigration, where the softening thing, the idea, oh, well, maybe there will be a path to citizenship, or maybe we won't deport everybody after all, and then he immediately had to go back and say, no, I definitely am not changing directions. We're definitely deporting everybody, and we're going to build that beautiful wall, as he always says. Apparently that's the thing he falls back on. Whenever he feels the crowd's energy waning at one of his rallies, he just says, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm going to build that wall. You know, the wall, the beautiful wall. It's very funny, actually, the way he brings that up. It's usually apropos of nothing he's been speaking about. And it's very obviously a technique that he's using when he's either lost in the speech or the teleprompter is broken, or, as I saw written up the other day, he feels the energy in the crowd waning. So he comes up with the wall thing. By the way, the wall thing, somebody asked, or maybe, I don't know, somebody hinted at the possibility, as if he had never thought of it before, that, well, what if they tunnel under the wall? But anyway, I saw him at some point, he's guaranteeing, no, there's not going to be any tunnels under this wall because we have anti-tunnel technology in our wall. Did anybody else see this thing? I'll have to dig this up I have to be certain, prove it to myself that I saw it, because that sounds so ridiculous. I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean. Well, we have anti-tunneling technology. And I would guess that for 75, perhaps as much as 90% of his crowd of supporters, that's enough for them. Well, anti-tunneling. Whew. I was wondering about that myself, because I'm a critical thinker. I thought, what if they tunnel under this wall? And the answer is anti-tunneling technology, which is what? Digging a big trench and burying the wall 20 feet down, and then also having the wall go 20 feet above the ground level? Why not dig a tunnel lower? Or why not tunnel through the wall? Or I don't know. I don't know what anti-tunneling technology is. It could be, I'm trying to imagine things. You could put sensors along the ground that would detect excavations beneath the wall, but that would just be trillions of dollars. And although Mexico's paying for it, so I don't know. I don't know if they have that kind of money. Can you force that out of them? And they're not really going to pay anyway, so what's the difference? I don't know. Very strange. The whole thing is bizarre, top to bottom, but what can you do? Let's see. Other things. I'm just scrolling back. I'm trying to think of what was the stuff I wanted to add. I can't remember what I was reminded of during the Bannon story, but maybe it'll come to me if I scroll a little bit. Let's see. I also noticed, let's see, there were definitely a few things. Oh, yes, you know what I wanted to mention? Last week I pointed out that, the part of the Clinton Foundation / Kennedy Center stuff, I told you that I found that the Secretary of State is ex officio a member of the Board of Trustees of the Kennedy Center. And so, essentially, everyone was in an uproar about the chairman of the Board of Trustees meeting with a member of the Board of Trustees. And by the way, I guess it should be pointed out that there's a whole list of members of the board who are, it's mandated by statute. There's actual statute on this, and, I guess I could scroll back to try and find it in my own timeline, but essentially, there's a lot of people that are involved in that. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, I think probably Speaker of the House is also part of the gang when it comes to this, but there's an actual statutory requirement listing. And there's I couldn't find any statutory requirement for the meeting, but of course, as it turns out, the meeting is a kind of an annual event during which the Kennedy Center honorees are presented to the secretary, and they, work out the details of the presentation ceremony. That's the big secret going on as between the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center and the Secretary of State. I don't know what else people thought was going on, but that's the reality of it. And the fact that there was a statutory requirement, I thought, was at least worth noting. I'll dig it up and give you the reference if I can. Let's see, other things that people have been talking about. Oh, yes, all right, I wanted to get to the Katrina Pearson thing. Almost forgot about that one. That was, she was on television last week trying to undo the damage of his apparent softening on immigration, and I loved that she had essentially used the word saying, he's not changing his position, he's just using different words to describe it. Did you all catch that one? That's rather amazing. And I mean, that's actually something that could make sense if the words that were being used to describe the position in this new refined position were in any way similar to the words they had used before. He's using different words, by which I mean words that are the opposite of the words that he used to use to do it. Not that they're different, but describing the same phenomenon in a more nuanced way. But, with Katrina Pearson, you just never really believe that she means the more nuanced of the two possible interpretations. Okay, so let's see. Other things that are required for discussion, I note. You know what? Here's the most fun story of the morning, anyway. Meet the man siphoning money from Donald Trump. I think that's an interesting one. This guy, I can't decide whether he's just a hero or a nut or both. He's an actual Trump supporter, so you can't get too excited about it. Politico is the first with the story of a 25-year-old man with no Trump ties who has raised $1 million by dangling dinner with the GOP nominee. And this is really quite brilliant, except for the fact that it's evil, but he's robbing evil people, so maybe it's okay. I don't know. I don't know how to deal with him in Talmudic fashion, but I'll let you decide. At a glance, the two websites, Politico says, look virtually indistinguishable. By the way, the reporting here ought to be noted. Shane Goldmacher. Good job here. You probably went to the Archer School. Wink, wink. You know what I mean? I don't know. Not sure. Anyway, two websites that look virtually indistinguishable. Both feature a photo of Donald Trump in a suit and red tie in front of a giant American flag. That's not hard to find. Both seemingly offer a chance for two to win dinner with Donald Trump. One is donaldjtrump.com, and the other is dinnerwithtrump.org. The first belongs to Trump's campaign, as you might have guessed. The second is a scheme run by Ian Hawes, a 25-year-old Maryland man who has no affiliation with Trump or his campaign, so they say anyway, and who has preyed on more than 20,000 unsuspecting donors. Good for you. Collecting more than $1 million in the process. In just its first 3 weeks of operation. Hawes's PAC. Oh, now that puts a bit of a different picture in mind. Like if it was just Ian Hawes saying send money, and then Ian Hawes was the $1 million that got raised just went to Ian Hawes's pocket. That's a different kind of a story. But Hawes's PAC, which spent more than $108,000 on Facebook ads offering an opportunity to win dinner with Donald Trump, has netted itself nearly $350,000 in donations, according to federal records. The guy's filing and everything. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. The biggest chunk of money raised, $133,000, went to a company that Hawes founded and owns, Cartsoft LLC. The purpose of the payments is described on federal records as media and media purchasing, though Cartsoft's website describes itself as an online payment processing platform. Since its launch, the PAC has collected more than $1 million, Hawes told Politico. It has reportedly spent $0 on behalf of Trump. Well, if he did, he would be coordinating, and that's wrong. See? Quote, now here's a quote from a donor. I feel ripped off and taken advantage of. This is horrible. That was not my intent, said Mary Pat Kulina, who owns a paper shredding company in Maryland and gave $265 to Hawes's group. A paper shredding company. That is innovative. Kulina thought she had given to Trump's campaign until told otherwise by Politico. This is robbery, she said. I want my money back, and I want them to add up what they stole from people and give it to Donald Trump. Yeah, well, they won't, because it was fine. It was legal, and you're an idiot, and you made a mistake. It's not necessarily a mistake I wouldn't have made, except for I wouldn't be tempted to give to Donald Trump at all, but I could see where people could be fooled, although you would think at some point, like, I mean, if you're a responsible adult and you run a business, I mean, just read where you are. I know you're in the business of shredding everything that could be readable, but I mean, honestly, read what you're doing. It's your money. Why don't you just shred your money? Anyway, of the 156 donors who gave more than $200 to Hawes's group in June, $200 is the threshold for names to be included in federal filings, and yes, we're talking FEC filings. Politico contacted dozens of those folks and spoke with 11 of them. Everyone interviewed said they believed they had given to Trump's campaign, and not an unconnected PAC. To whom did you make out the check? The unconnected PAC. But of course they probably gave online, and it was just a matter of a click, and that's what makes online fundraising easier and also easier to fool people with. I would say, unfortunately, that's simply a matter of pure chance, Hawes said in an interview defending his group and denying it as a scam. But the dinner scheme is just the beginning. By late July, Hawes, who calls himself, quote, a quote, registered genius, board-certified hacker, and grape soda connoisseur in his Twitter bio, and so therefore a joke, had launched another website, crookedhillary2016.org, according to Internet Domain Registration records, and began promoting a contest to revoke her security clearance. How a contest would do that? It wouldn't. It's just same purpose. Raise money, build a list. The group's Facebook page copies the Crooked Hillary logo that is used on Trump's official lyingcrookedhillary.com website. But as we know, Trump doesn't respect intellectual property rights. He keeps playing everybody else's music despite cease and desist letters, so I assume that everything will be totally consistent and he will not expect that his intellectual property in his campaign website is protected. Or he could just be totally gimme-tarian. We're raising $1 million, says Hawes' site. We're raising $1 million from small donors to fight Crooked Hillary's campaign of lies. Hawes also registered I'mWithTrump.org in late June, records show, though that site remains dormant. As of Sunday, Hawes's group had raised $1.1 million from 21,253 donors, he said, which is hilarious, but tragic at the same time, as I consider that we have not raised even 1% of the $1.1 million from 21,253 donors that this guy has, and we do an original show and our own work, and we're not stealing anything from anybody. Well, I guess that's not really true. We're stealing all sorts of intellectual property all the time by reading these articles on the air, although we do tell you where they were placed and who wrote them and let you click on them for yourself, and we do make them our own work product by adding our own thoughts along the way. Okay, so we're all thieves in some way or another. But still, okay, so I'll just take the 0.1 of the 1.1 million, if we could get that. But we're not anywhere close. Anyway, more than 410,000 people had signed up for the dinner contest, giving him a massive email list that he can leverage for more money for years to come. And by the way, that should be part of the evidence in his favor if there were ever a trial on this. He's raised that money from 21,253 donors, but more than 410,000 people had signed up for the dinner contest, indicating to me that the vast majority of people who have found the site and signed up for the dinner contest were well aware of the fact that they did not have to donate in order to be registered in the contest. Now, whether or not it's a legit contest is something we'll get to a little bit later in the article. But there you have it. 410,000 people have signed up. So that's out of, and 21,253 of them donated along the way. So almost 400,000, about 389,000 plus of the people who have signed up were not fooled and didn't give any money. Whether or not they were fooled into believing that the contest was real, I don't know, but it didn't cost them anything. So, well, that's 20% of 100,000 divided by 4 for 400,000. So about 5% of people who signed up donated. That's not, that's a good return, a good rate of return percentage-wise in terms of the number of people who would take some kind of action and then add some money to it. But not bad in terms of response rate. But that gives you an idea of the scale of these sorts of, fishing expeditions, right? If you advertise on Facebook and spend $100,000 doing it, you'll reach enough people to get there's probably about 1 million people have clicked on and hit the site. Maybe more than that, I would guess. According to the laws of the way our laws of the 10%, you would think that actually more in the neighborhood of 4 million plus have clicked through, and of that, 10% have been incentivized to enter the contest, and only 5% of those, though, have been moved to give money in hopes of multiplying their chances. Anyway, we'll continue with the article here. Internet-based scam packs are hardly new to 2016. In the past, some have made lookalike campaign sites and bought Google ads to lure unsuspecting donors. Facebook, with its vast audience and ability to target users by political ideology, has proved an alluring tool this cycle. And Trump, with legions of passionate fans, has become an appealing target. Well, we should also add legions of dumb fans. That's what makes him a truly appealing target. Facebook declined to comment for the story. Because Hawes's PAC has zero ties to Trump's campaign, the dinner they are dangling won't be very intimate, but there is a dinner. The fine print in gray, size 8.5 font on a black background at the bottom of the website, discloses that this, quote, dinner, unquote, actually amounts to the PAC buying 2 tickets at a sponsor-selected fundraising evening event held with Donald Trump and other attendees. So somewhere there'll be a fundraising dinner, presumably, for the Trump campaign, and Hawes's PAC, I guess, purports to be prepared to spend money to buy 2 tickets at this fundraising dinner. So at which point some money will go to Trump, and he'll pick a name maybe out of a hat or whatever and give one of the donors 2 tickets. And then legally, what are you going to do? David Easlick, this was funny too. David Easlick, a lawyer in Virginia, gave more than $1,000 to the American Horizons PAC. Again, that's not Trump, right? Okay, I assumed it was coming from Trump, and we donated $1,000 because you might have a better chance than if you've given $100, Easlick said, which is amazing because that's, I think, legally speaking, you're not allowed to really do it that way unless, I think if you gave a number of donations, you could do that. Although I suppose it wouldn't be out of bounds for people to say you get an entry per dollar or per $10 because if it... I think you're supposed to not be allowed to do those things for legal sweepstakes type competitions, although there's nothing to prevent you from donating $100 10 different times and getting 10 different entries. And I know it's a loophole, but if you're willing to go through that annoyance, I guess that's when you okay, fine. You annoy yourself, you get the prize, or at least the prize of additional entries. But I don't know. Maybe he's the kind of lawyer that doesn't know sweepstakes rules. That could be anybody. This is where it really became funny. He asked with more than a hint of resignation, is it a fraud or something? Like, why would an attorney have any idea what fraud is or what constitutes fraud? Is it a fraud or something? Are you asking me? Yeah. I'm a writer for Politico. You're a lawyer. Why don't you, I don't know, crack a book or something? Is it? There's nobody you can ask? It's a rhetorical question, I guess. Hawes's site doesn't initially ask for money. First, one can enter the dinner contest simply by providing an email, which is great for him because he can sell the email list later. And most people think of as, oh, that's a free entry. But, of course, you're creating value for the guy who's harvesting the email. But nobody thinks that deeply about it. Anyway, it quickly offers a chance to double your chances. That's problematic. By donating, even though the fine print, thankfully, is there for his sake, says contributing will not improve chances of winning. One person, Jared Peevler of Indiana, posted screenshots of his correspondence with Hawes's group on Facebook after he complained it was a scam. And he's super professional himself. Quote, I'd like to point out that it clearly states that contributing does not increase chances of winning, both in the rules within the link and at the bottom of the email, Peevler wrote, adding in all caps, eat the S word, eat S. Which I'm not certain why he chose to include. He's obviously mad, but why he chose to include that. Because, interestingly, I mean, the reasonable part of his letter, it actually sounds like a defense from Hawes. I'd like to point out that it clearly states that contributing does not increase chances of winning, both in the rules and within the link at the bottom of the email, so that if you contribute believing you will increase your chances, you're dumb. But I guess he's complaining about the double your chances by donating line. And that's problematic. An email signed by Hawes replied, monetary contributions don't increase your chance of winning, but we do multiply your entries. We're also a political action committee, so it's our job to collect contributions. And then, just for funny, I guess, he adds at the end, so you can eat your own ass. Which I don't think is instructional. I think he's just retorting to the other person. And well, this is really funny. Peevler told Politico, that's when I knew it was fake. Professionals don't allow themselves to be drawn into an unprofessional conversation like that. Which, of course, started with Peevler being unprofessional and saying, eat S. But he wasn't writing in his professional capacity, I guess. Hawes said he did not recall writing such an email, and his records did not show any such correspondence. That's not something we would say, he said. Pissing people off is not something that we're trying to do. Well, not trying to. Anyway, another donor, Jeannie Borrow, an insurance broker from California, and why would an insurance broker read fine print, gave $1,015 to the group before she saw the fine print, that it wasn't actually affiliated with Trump. I thought it was very deceiving. I was very upset, Borrow said. She demanded and received a refund. I wonder why she received a refund. That's very interesting and, well, audacious, I might say, for an insurance broker. But in California, they're pretty heavily regulated. So maybe that's it. You were saved by California there, Jeannie. and a state regulation that I know you hate. If people complain, Hawes said, we'll be happy to return your donations right away. They had processed 110 refunds to date, he said. Those who want their money back, it says, can email help@AmericanHorizons.org. The American Horizons PAC, which Hawes registered with the FEC on June 10th, is actually the second incarnation of a Dinner with Donald Trump scheme, though both have ties to Hawes. An earlier group called the Recover America PAC was created in late November last year and registered by Michael Williams, a friend of Hawes, who listed the same website, dinnerwithtrump.org, as the current dinner-promoting PAC is using. The contact number provided to the FEC on that filing was affiliated online with a company called Glexia, where both Williams, CEO and president, and Hawes, executive vice president, are listed as employees. That first effort, however, never reported any further activity despite 3 subsequent letters from the FEC attorneys demanding additional paperwork. Then, in June, Hawes revived the idea. The new PAC immediately began buying Facebook ads, starting with $750 per day in June 10th, and building up to more than $15,000 on June 29th. In 3 weeks, the group had raised $349,958. So, lesson for you there. $15,750 in Facebook ads. They raised $350,000 off of that. A good ROI, I would say. Hawes took advantage of a vacuum left by a skeletal Trump operation that had failed to activate supporters online and protect its digital turf. Hawes noted that he bought Facebook ads and solicited money via email before Trump ever did, and created the dinner contest first. He noted Trump's campaign has never contacted them to request they stop using his name, even though the campaign did so to the FEC last fall about some other groups. The Trump campaign did not respond to requests for comment to this story. I applaud anyone that wants to dig into our financials, but they're looking at the wrong political organization, Hawes said. So far, his group's biggest expenditure was to his company, Cartsoft. Pretty smart. The next report is due in mid-October. Hawes declined to say what his personal cut has been. I don't want to say the number is 0 because that's not true, he said, calling any Cartsoft payments a standard markup. And as you know, those things can be pretty lucrative too. FEC Commissioner Ann Ravel declined to discuss any specific potential cases, but said in general the FEC was too powerless when it comes to combating fraud. That's the frustration I have. There's very little recourse, she said. People give money thinking it's going to a particular person or a particular cause, and it's a consumer protection issue as far as I'm concerned. John McQueen, a funeral home owner in Florida, he can't go broke that way, remembered seeing the ad in his Facebook feed. I had planned to give $1,000 to his campaign, and when my wife saw it also on her Facebook feed, she said, why not do this? He recalled. He gave $1,015 in late June. I wonder why the 15. Is that like some sort of processing fee or something? Who really reads the fine print? He lamented. Everybody's supposed to, but nobody does. If he wants to refund me my $1,000, I'm happy to turn around and give it to Mr. Trump. That's not going to get you the money, though. You got to file. Hawes' PAC ended June with $88,197 cash on hand. It is not clear what activities he has planned on Trump's behalf this fall. We use the money that we collect in a way that we feel best creates value for the people who have donated to us, he said. Okay, good use of the business judgment rule. Hawes' most recent activity online was posting publicly on his personal Facebook page that he got engaged in mid-August on the bow of a yacht overlooking Miami. Couldn't be more perfect, he wrote, except that you got Zika. As he posted pictures sipping champagne with his fiancée and of her glittering oval engagement ring. Paid for, I guess, largely by you guys who gave all that money. I can't decide what's wrong with this. He's started a PAC. It's essentially a super PAC, but he started a PAC and he solicited donations, and he's staying within the FEC's limits because he's not a super PAC. He's reporting all donations over $200 in itemized fashion. And he's building a list, which is enormously valuable and which he can sell later on. I mean, there's nothing illegal about this. I love that the lawyer is like, maybe it's fraud or something. The only thing I think that gets him in any trouble is the copy that says you can double your chances of winning by donating, but even that is defensible. What I meant was, if you log on to the website, you'll see that you don't need to give in order to submit or to enter a submission into the contest. But if you later donate money, then you'll get a second entry, and then you will have doubled your possibilities. Of course, I suppose you could just simply enter twice without donating, but I don't know whether the website lets you do that. Oh, and now I'm reminded, finally, of the thing that reminds me of the thing that I was reminded of during the Bannon story. How convenient! If I can actually find that story. That one goes way back. I was just struck by this one and set it aside. The actual official Donald Trump website is not that much less scammy than this guy's website, as a matter of fact. This one goes back a ways. I wonder who even knows whether I actually saved it at this point. But somebody figured out that the website, the official Donald Trump campaign website, if you try to donate money online, you will typically be doing that by credit card to keep everything nice and neat and easy and sterile over the internet. But as it turns out, it's so strange. The website asks you for your credit card information so you can give the donation, and then it basically automatically signs you up for recurring monthly campaign donations, and there's no method, or at least there was no method at the time of the writing of this piece, which was admittedly back in the beginning of August, and you will find it on mic.com, M-I-C.com. Written by James Denon, Donald Trump's campaign website won't let, well, at least some, cancel recurring donations. You sign up to donate, it signs you up for recurring monthly donations, which, by the way, I encourage people to do over at Patreon, where that's the whole basis of the way they have their giving set up. But also, if you prefer giving by PayPal, because you know and are familiar and comfortable with PayPal, PayPal will likewise take your money each month and transfer it here to the Kagro in the Morning Show, where we can use it to do things like thank Scott Anderson for doing all of this work for us every afternoon. And I guess eventually, when the time comes and this computer that runs the show begins to run down and die, the original computer, we're still using it and still in good shape. No worries right now about that. But occasionally other pieces of equipment die. We've had to replace microphones here and there and bits and pieces of the ancillary equipment. And Daily Kos was kind enough to help us with the startup costs of the big ticket items, but I guess ultimately it would be nice if we didn't have to take money out of the coffers that is going to pay, say, the employees of Daily Kos for doing their daily work. And by that I mean the full-time folks who are actually producing all of that front page content and the technology behind it, people who are actually working full-time for Daily Kos, not me. But all the other ancillary operations that go on, keeping the place running, and, of course, donating to our candidates and putting money behind our respective activist causes, then that's a couple $1,000 that won't have to be sunk into a computer, which, admittedly, very important in giving us our show, but could be spent elsewhere. If you know what I mean. Well, and of course, one day it would be really nice if, this was a real job too, like I keep pointing out. It'd be nice to be able to justify the show's existence to my wife, whose car is being repaired, for those of you who are following along. But the good news is it's repairable. The bad news is it's expensive, and it's right at that borderline where you might as well just maybe buy a new car, except that means, 36 to now to like 72 months. They stretch out car loans to like 6 years now of car payments, which we were free and clear of for a long time because we drive our cars to death. She's driving an 03. Why? She likes it, but likes not having car payments even better. So do I. Anyway, let's talk about this cheat here. Trump's campaign website won't let you cancel the donations. And I also will not let you cancel donations. Actually, because I use Patreon and PayPal, I think it's a pretty easy thing to do since they're largely legit. I say largely because PayPal still, I guess, pays that jerk Peter Thiel money every time you pay. I guess I encourage you to go over to Patreon so that you don't have to give PayPal more money and Peter Thiel can't sue more websites out of existence. Although maybe, I don't know, maybe that one deserved it. I don't know where we come down as progressives these days. What's politically correct for me to believe about Gawker? Anyway, better story here. You used to love Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, we suppose, for this story. But now you've had a change of heart, if that's what you changed. People barely change their pants. I don't know how they're going to change their hearts, but okay. And say you want to cancel your recurring monthly donation to his campaign. Too bad. As the screenshots below demonstrate, there is no clear option on Trump's website to cancel monthly contributions or remove your credit card information. The site layout makes it appear that once you've set up a donation, you may only switch from one valid credit card to another. That's the only thing it can handle. There is actually a way to cancel, but only if you register your account by setting a password and navigate through a labyrinthine process. And I think in the original version of this story, they hadn't even discovered that. I imagine this is an update to the story that they actually found a way. There is a way built in, there has to be, I think, to keep them out of really serious legal trouble, to cancel the thing that just doesn't have to be easy to find. This design flaw, if that's what it is, first came to light Wednesday, and remember this is back on August 4th of this year, when CNN reporter Jeremy Diamond tweeted a screenshot of an email from a disenchanted Trump donor who alleged that the campaign has not returned voice message requests to cancel contributions. The identity of the alleged donor is not shown. Here is the screenshot here from the help department. I don't know what. I guess the help account. It looks like a Facebook message back to Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy. Unfortunately, this is to Jeremy, the help desk guy at. Okay, I gotcha. At the campaign. Unfortunately, I set up a recurring political contribution to Donald Trump's website. After the most recent Trump blowouts, I've left voice messages for his campaign to call me. Oh, this is Jeremy, the reporter. There we go. I lost track of that. I've left voice messages for his campaign to call me back to provide instructions on how to cancel that recurring payment, but I've also logged onto his website and there are no instructions or place on the website to stop the recurring payment. I don't think it exists, and I imagine I'm not the only one trying to find the place to cancel it. Though I thought maybe if you could help me bring some attention to it, maybe it would suddenly appear on his site after some news channels made a stink about it. That's an email, I guess, to Jeremy Diamond that Jeremy tweeted out with the note, inbox, help, I set up a recurring contribution to Trump's campaign and want to cancel it. Copy to real Donald Trump, so I'm not aware of it. I didn't know about it. After investigating, Mike can confirm that there is no easy way, no easy option to stop recurring donations on Trump's donation site. We set up a recurring donation of $1 and found no button or other obvious way to cancel payments or remove a credit card from the system, either on the home page, the update card page, or in your contribution confirmation email. Once you're registered, if you try to change your payment information on Trump's site, you will see no option to remove your credit card, only update it. And there's some redacted screenshots of that attempt. And so it is. There's no option to do anything but update your card. Then when you click on update card, if you try that, you see a page that allows you to alter your payment information, but you cannot completely delete your credit card. You're forced to replace it with another valid credit card. Invalid numbers are rejected, and the transaction doesn't go through. Similarly, the email confirmation Trump donors receive does not include any reference to how to cancel payments. While donors can hit unsubscribe at the bottom of the email, doing so does not delete your account information from the donations page. And here also a screenshot of the confirmation email that they got when they signed up for the $1 recurring contribution. Mike also made a $1 recurring contribution to the campaign for Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton and received a confirmation email that, by contrast, provides an email address for donors to write in with problems. unlike the message from Trump's campaign, the confirmation from Clinton's also acknowledges that you've made a recurring donation in the first place, warning you to expect the monthly charge. If you go to Clinton's campaign site, there's also an accessible option to remove your card from the site. Clicking this button immediately halts your donations. A campaign representative confirmed to me in an email to Mike. If you log out and log back in to Clinton's site, you'll see that your card has in fact been deleted. It turns out that there is a way to delete your card from Trump's campaign system, but it seems you must first have registered an account and created a password. If you didn't do so, there's no clear way to cancel your payment. So unless you registered first, if you just go right to the donation page, you're stuck. Assuming you did create an account and have logged in, to stop your payment, in case any of you are listening and want to stop your payments to the Trump campaign, you must click the small gray question mark icon in the upper right corner of the donations page. Then you'll see the following screen, and in order to delete your card, you must click Manage, which is down at the lower left. Then you'll be redirected to the website of the Trump campaign's vendor. See, it's their fault, not his. And there you must click Recurring Plans, and only then can you cancel your monthly payment. Notably, even after you cancel, there's still no obvious way to delete your card number from their system without replacing it with another valid number. And that is very interesting, and not only in the difficulty of canceling the transactions, but in the fact that you can't erase your credit card number from their system. And it's not theirs. I didn't design it. It's a third party. I outsourced the whole thing. To be honest, just to throw another little monkey wrench in the whole Putin thing, it's almost exactly what you would expect the site to look like and how you would expect it to operate if the people to whom they had outsourced the back-end payment part of the donations section were in fact, I don't know, Russian hackers who are interested in stealing your identity and just reaping credit card numbers and keeping them forever. That's the way they would do it. And golly, that's the way it looks if you go there now. The Federal Election Commission does not have rules explicitly about the cancellation of recurring campaign contributions, said FEC spokesperson Christian Hilland. They're probably deadlocked and can't come up with any rules. Our regulations do not speak specifically to that issue, he said. The only way problems with recurring donations would trigger an investigation, he explained, was if the total added up to more than the federally mandated maximum donation of $2,700. The Trump campaign did not return multiple requests for comment by press time. Recurring payments are increasingly coming under fire as a way companies get unwitting consumers to pay for services they don't want. Some businesses are more transparent than others. Spotify, for instance, has a handy cancel link right above the button for updating payment information. Trump's campaign would do well to take a page from Spotify's book. No. Though there is a note, secondly, this story has been updated. Yeah, when I first read it, I don't think there was any information about how to actually cancel. And I don't know whether that existed before. They may have added that and then told them and then they updated it. But okay, to be fair, it now exists. Trump's campaign would do well to take a page from Spotify's book if they wanted to be honest and open and transparent with their donors. They don't. They want to steal as much money as possible. And so, no, they would not do well in their actual goals to do that because then they would not be able to steal as much money. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. All right, let's see. Lots of other interesting things. Let me just throw this one in there because it happened over the weekend. I think it's interesting, and we'll add this to the roundup of stories. I wonder. Let me see if I don't have the list yet, and it's not late or anything, Justice. Don't worry about that. This has the feel of something that if I didn't mention, I have a feeling that the after show would pick this one up. But because I've remembered already, I'll go ahead and lay it out there, and I'm certain that even if they pick it up afterwards, they'll have a lot more and a lot more interesting things to say about it. But I'll pick this one up. This over the weekend, you probably heard something about it if you're a sports fan, because America, sports. Colin Kaepernick. In the news, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, in case you live elsewhere, under a rock, or England, in Gideon's case, or just don't care about American football, or disapprove of American football because of the concussion danger, as is increasingly the case. Okay, Colin Kaepernick. If you're in America, you would likely have heard the story. He's got a new thing going on. This is interesting. I bet Armando would have a lot to say about this one too. Maybe we'll discuss that one a little bit later in the week. He's no longer, I guess, standing for the national anthem before the games. Now, it's the preseason, but you may have noticed in the preseason, as well as in the regular season, they do play the national anthem before everybody knocks their brains inside out, which I don't even know. I mean, I know it's traditional when we do that before sporting events and everything, but even that is kind of jingoistic and dumb, and to be honest, we shouldn't bother. But okay, we do, because something, America, and now if you don't, it's like not wearing a flag lapel pin, and you're officially unpatriotic. But the heart of the matter has been Colin Kaepernick has said basically, and I don't even know if I have the I got a link anyway to the explanation of why not. He's not standing for the national anthem. Why? Kaepernick has it says here in this NFL.com entry. I hope this won't autoplay, but I'm sure it will. All right, video loading. It's an ad. I'll click block.
This going on prior to
the
game.
Can I stop this thing? All right. Anyway, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick has willingly immersed himself into controversy by refusing to stand for the playing of the national anthem in protest of what he deems are the wrongdoings against African Americans and minorities in the United States. That's an accurate statement. He's deeming it quite correctly, in my opinion, but okay. His latest refusal to stand for the anthem, and that's a tough thing to choose to do, because it will immediately immerse you in controversy, and people confuse a lot of things, including, like who cares, for instance, if the anthem is even played before a football game? The rules are the same, the outcome of the game is going to be the same. You don't need to invoke God's blessing, and even if you did to play a good football game, the national anthem won't do it. It's a secular thing, and God presumably doesn't care about the national anthem. But how dare I say that? And I've just been Dixie chicked, right? To suggest that there's never been any suggestion, by the way, that God cares whether or not the national anthem is played before the game. But now that I've brought it up, they will now insist that I'm not only anti-American but anti-God as well, and that there is, in fact, a spiritual link with the national anthem, and if I don't believe so, then I reject American exceptionalism. All right. Anyway, his latest refusal to stand for the anthem, and he has done this in at least one other preseason game, came before the 49ers preseason loss, that'll show you, to Green Bay at Levi's Stadium on Friday night. I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color, Kaepernick told NFL media in an exclusive interview after the game. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. Interesting enough. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder. And we all know what he's talking about. And Black Lives Matter has been addressing it forever. And it's the kind of thing that now that it's mixed up in flag and national anthem, people will overlook the actual point that he's trying to make and say, well, you could make that on your own time, or not when you're a 49er, and the 49ers could presumably fine him for it, and that would be all right, and I assume he's prepared to accept that. But lots of people will, somehow judge him now inappropriate to include him in NFL games at all. They should boot him from the roster. People are burning his jerseys because that's so super symbolic and interesting. But on the other hand, I recognize that this is like, this is inflammatory. One of the more inflammatory things that you can do without actually hurting anybody, for instance, is to do something like this, and this will put people automatically on the other side, even if some people who might even have been, maybe, I don't know. It's very difficult to imagine. But I'm certain, because there are so many people in the world, there are a few that say, well, I am sympathetic to the reason and the cause. But the flag, it's all of our flags and all of our national anthem. And that's true to an extent. I guess I'll toss this one into the mix, though. The Intercept, which is a great place to go if you're ever looking. You want to be progressively anti-American. The Intercept will help. Always stands ready. But John Schwartz, writing this one. I don't know how often John writes for The Intercept, but he's a clever guy, and he's reliably lefty and progressive, and even when he takes a position that you say, oh, The Intercept, oh my God, is this Glenn Greenwald? I don't want to hear from him. John Schwartz will always throw you a curve. He's a thinking guy. Anyway, Colin Kaepernick, he says, is righter than you know. The national anthem is a celebration of slavery. What? Interesting. This has got a lot of wrapped up in it, including the fact that, well, what we mean here is, it's right in the lyrics, and you're now going through them. Well, say, can you see? Dawn's early light, proudly we hailed, twilight's last gleaming. Doesn't say anything about Negroes that I can... Slavery, what are you talking about? Twilight's last gleaming, bursting there, proof of the night, flags there, huh? Land of the free, home of the land of the free, is that a joke? Is that what we're talking? No, there's more verses to the national anthem, which you forgot about. I forgot about. We all forgot about. Even the super patriots with guns and everything and camouflage, so you can't see. I can't see you. You're walking down a city street in jungle camouflage, but I can't see. I can only see this floating AR-15, and I can't see who's carrying it because of camouflage. That guy's so patriotic. I bet they never knew that there were other verses. Now, granted, they're all written in sort of archaic English poetry style, and to be honest, having now read the additional lyrics, I still don't know what the hell they're talking about. But John says he does. Before a preseason game, he begins on Friday. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick refused to stand for the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner. He explained why, and he spoke only about the present. I'm not going to stand up to show pride in the flag, etc. You heard the explanation before. Twitter then went predictably nuts. No doubt about it, and I guess he's got a couple of examples. We'll skip them. With at least one 49ers fan burning Kaepernick's jersey. Carbon tax on that, please. Almost no one seems to be aware that even if the U.S. were a perfect country today, and it is, it would be bizarre to expect African-American players to stand for the Star-Spangled Banner. Would it be bizarre? Why? Because it literally celebrates the murder of African-Americans. All right. Read on. Few people know this because we only ever sing the first verse, and it's long enough as it is. Can you imagine, by the way, the arrogance of playing like 4 verses at the Olympics or something? Not only the arrogance, but can you imagine the people tearing their hair out at NBC? Oh my God, the time we have to give. That would be funny. That would be hilarious. They should play 4 go-rounds of the national anthem and force them to forego advertising revenue for every medal ceremony they show, or face the wrath of American viewers for cutting away too early. Although I guess you could cut away very quickly after the first verse and just pretend there were no other verses being played. Anyway, few people know this because we only ever sing the first verse. But read the end of the 3rd verse and you'll see why the Star-Spangled Banner is not just a musical atrocity, and it is. It's an intellectual and moral one, too. I read through all the lyrics, and there's an awful lot of them, and I think there were 4 verses. The 3rd verse is the suspect one here. I will read the words. I tried my best at home to fit them into the tune. It doesn't work. It is an atrocity in terms of musical atrocity, but it's also a poetic atrocity, too. These are the words he's talking about, though. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And you can kind of feel where that might fit into the music. No refuge could save. I don't know where you would fit that in. No, that's probably not the part. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, probably. Right, there we are. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave. Get it? Or the land of the free. I'm not going to sing the rest of this. And the home of the brave. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. Okay, poesy. Not sure what it means. Well, John has an idea. The Star-Spangled Banner, Americans hazily remember, was written by Francis Scott Key about the Battle of Fort McHenry in Baltimore during the War of 1812. But we don't ever talk about how the War of 1812 was a war of aggression that began with an attempt by the U.S. to grab Canada for the British Empire. I'm sorry, Canada, and I really enjoy the fact that you're an independent country. Gonna need you soon. However, we wildly overestimated the strength of the U.S. military. Golly. By the time of the Battle of Fort McHenry in 1814, the British had counterattacked and overrun Washington, D.C., setting fire to the White House. And one of the key tactics behind the British military's success was its active recruitment of American slaves. As a detailed 2014 article in Harper's explains, the orders given to the Royal Navy's Admiral Sir George Cockburn read, "Let the landings you make be more for the protection, of the desertion of the black population than with a view to any other advantage. The great point to be attained is the cordial support of the black population. With them properly armed and backed with 20,000 British troops, Mr. Madison, our president, will be hurled from his throne." Whole families found their way to the ships of the British, who accepted everyone and pledged no one would be given back to their, quote, owners. Adult men were trained to create a regiment called the Colonial Marines, who participated in many of the most important battles, including the August 1814 raid on Washington. Then, on the night of September 13, 1814, the British bombarded Fort McHenry. Key, seeing the fort's flag the next morning, was inspired to write the lyrics for the Star-Spangled Banner. So when Key penned "No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave," he was taking great satisfaction, John argues, in the death of slaves who'd freed themselves. His perspective may have been affected by the fact that he owned several slaves himself. With that in mind, think again about the next two lines. "And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." The reality is that there were human beings fighting for freedom with incredible bravery during the War of 1812. However, the Star-Spangled Banner glorifies America's triumph over them, and then turns that reality completely upside down, transforming their killers into the courageous freedom fighters, I guess, that we all celebrate today when we stand for the national anthem. After the U.S. and the British signed a peace treaty at the end of 1814, the U.S. government demanded the return of American property, which at that point was over 6,000 people. The British refused, settling most of them in Canada, and others going to Trinidad, where their descendants are still known as Americans, which we call ourselves now. So, how about that for an interesting perspective on the Kaepernick story? There's a little bit more to it. You're invited to read it on your own time. Now, of course, you're directed to give your time over to the folks at the After Show for their Metaphor Monday show, featuring the following. Most pediatricians in the United States report more parents are refusing to vaccinate their children. It's getting worse. All of the doctors and hospitals in a Chicago women's health care plan refused to remove her dislodged IUD because of affiliations to the Catholic Church. And Johns Hopkins University researchers say evidence of fracking's adverse impact on health keeps mounting. How about the last half? They'll be reporting on German Chancellor Angela Merkel's criticism of nations that refuse to take in Muslim refugees. And it's never a good sign when real life in the United States resembles a Fyodor Dostoevsky novel. Yeah, that's probably a bad sign, I would admit. Okay, all of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Kos community calendar, and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice, coming up, as usual, right after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you very much for listening. I'm proud of myself for getting all of the After Show preview in today for once. It's been a while since I was able to do that. Thanks very much, Justice, keeping the wheels greased and turning and doing that every morning. Thanks. Do stay tuned and listen in then, and I will see you tomorrow.